the station hall next to the postal carriage, you'll see various items you would expect on a railway platform. Crates and packages, toilets and ticket booths, and if you listen carefully, the barks from the dogs, pets of travellers awaiting their journey. One of the items on these platforms is a barrow designed for moving luggage. This simple luggage barrow holds a very special place in my heart, as it carries the name of the town where I grew up, the town of Knaresborough. I can't really talk about Knaresborough's railway ties before I explain a bit about the town's history first. Kings nearly always read easy story books or ride on ugly green horses, or Knaresborough is a very ancient town. Its first claim to fame was nearly 1,000 years ago, when it was first mentioned in the Domesday Book. It overlooked the impressive Nidd gorge and was a strategic point between York and surrounding areas. It was surrounded by the forest of Knaresborough, and it was a popular hunting ground for royalty. A castle was built overlooking the gorge in 1100 AD. Although it was not known who commissioned the castle, we do know it was the very same castle that 4 knights took shelter in after they murdered the Archbishop of Canterbury and canonised Saint Thomas Becket. In 1210, King John had taken over the honour of Knaresborough himself and bought one of the town's longest-running traditions. On April 15th, 1210, the day before Good Friday, King John, inspired by the Holy Scriptures to show love to one another, gave a gift of garments, food, forks and gifts to the poor and needy of Knaresborough at the castle. The service was called the Maunday service, and over time the type of gift was changed to a monetary sum. Today, the senior royal family keep up the tradition of giving Maunday money. However, the candidates are selected are pensioners from various churches and are often chosen in recognition of their charitable contributions. The Maunday money is presented in 2 leather pouches and are specially struck in denominations of 1 penny, 2 pence, 3 pence and 4 pence. The white pouch contains coins to the value of the present monarch's age, while the red contains a separate £5 note and 50 pence coin. The coins can be used and circulated, but considering where they came from, who would? The castle stood proud on its rocky plinth and oversaw many changes. In particular, in 1488, in the midst of a huge thunderstorm, across the river a young baby was born to a 15-year-old girl in a small cave. The child was hunchback and deformed, and her first cackle quelled the storm around her. The child was known as Ursula Shipton, and grew to be one of the most loved and revered figures within the town. Her knowledge of plants and potions earned her the respect all around the country, and she was most famous for making her prophecies. Mother Shipton correctly foresaw the Spanish Armada and the Great Fire of London, as well as carriages that men would travel in that would be horseless, and iron ships that would float on water. There is one rather scary prophecy, however, that the world shall end when the High Bridge has thrice fallen. The bridge, which is located near the entrance, near the aptly aimed World's End pub, has fallen down twice since the prophecy. And when Knaresborough had a storm recently that weakened the road above the bridge, the council took no chances, deeming the repair as highly critical. The castle remained intact until 1644. Following the defeat of the royalist at Marston Moor between York and Knaresborough, the castle was under siege, and after standing for over 500 years, it finally fell by Oliver Cromwell's hand. Oliver ordered the castle be destroyed so it could never be used against him. When the castle was dismantled, the local townspeople petitioned to save the dungeon and the keep. The nearby courthouse, who oversaw the power within the town, suggested to the town that the dungeon would be a perfect place to hold a lot of prisoners and debtors at once, and the townspeople wholeheartedly agreed. So while the castle had lost its royal command, it still remained a law command over the town. But let's move forward to the early 1830s. Mother Shipton's Cave was becoming a famous tourist attraction. The town was growing, and the castle was a novelty. The courthouse was no longer used for punishing prisoners, but the Tudor design remained and was used mostly for land acquisition rights. The railway boom was in full swing, and the nearby town of Harrogate was getting notoriety for its healing springs. The East and West Yorkshire Junction Railway was established in 1845 with a view to connecting the Great North of England Railway and the Leeds and First Railway, with Knaresborough being the connecting junction. The G&E branch of the line started at York and crossing Marston Moor, calling at the hamlets of Cattle, Poppleton, Allerton and Goldsborough, while the Leeds Northern services to the towns of Pannell, Wheaton and the nearby spa town of Harrogate. Thomas Granger, the line's designer, had a bit of challenge on his hands. Up until he reached Knaresborough, the line was pretty straightforward as the land was fairly flat. But as he came into Knaresborough town, he was met with a large rolling hill and the infamous Nidd gorge. The gorge, made out of millions of years of erosion by the river Nidd travelling below, was an impressive scar. Thomas started first by building a tunnel underneath the high street to accommodate his new station near to the gorge's edge. The station was out of the way of the main street and the traffic. Once complete, Thomas had the daunting task of crossing the gorge itself. Thomas commissioned a viaduct with 4 large arches over 80 feet high. He commissioned the contractors Wilson and Benson to complete the project and used stone from the local nearby Abbey Crags, which was made of the same stone as the castle. The work was almost complete when one day in March of 1848 a loud, thunderous noise rippled around the gorge. The viaduct collapsed almost entirely into the river, with its central pillar beams still standing. It was rumoured that the noise could be heard around the town, and it rumbled for near enough 5 minutes before it was settled. No one was hurt in the collapse, but the lime and stone that entered the water decimated the environment, and the river's fish stock was almost wiped out in minutes. The cause of the collapse was attributed to poor materials, poor construction, and the recent poor weather, which had caused the river to be in flood. Thomas ordered that the central pillar be pulled down and he started again. The station was moved to a nearby bridge called Hayes Park on a temporary basis, so at least part of the line could still be used. Luckily for Thomas, the project had a huge backer. George Hudson, the railway king, made initial arrangements for the Leeds and First Railway to help. They agreed, but they pulled out after just less than a year later. Thomas once again turned to Hudson for help, and Hudson asked the New York, Newcastle and Berwick Railway to step in instead, with an agreement that the railway be paid in the number of miles completed, and with the use of lighter engines. The York and North Midland Railway stepped in, and the cost to replace the bridge exceeded Thomas's and everyone's expectations. But Thomas knew that was of little consequence. He needed the viaduct to be the best he could make it. He simply couldn't risk another failure. To add flair, he decided to style the viaduct on the castle ruins and added elaborate features such as turrets. The finished viaduct had a mixed reception. Some called it an eyesore over a pristine gorge, while others praised the viaduct and the way the arches cast reflections on the water, which was beautiful. The York and North Midland Railway took over the entirety of the line in 1852, and they commissioned a new branch line between the temporary station at Hayes Park and before the tunnel leading into the town. The new junction, called Knaresborough Junction, would facilitate the nearby town of Borough Bridge, and the land surrounding the junction was perfect for a small goods and freight yard. While the viaduct was being built, trouble was brewing in the castle. In 1856, a new Justice of the Peace was appointed to the town and began to mould the law to his own benefit. John Simpson, who was also the town's doctor, felt he was untouchable. The castle and land surrounding it was given to the town by Oliver Cromwell as recreational land for the town to enjoy. John saw an opportunity to extend his property and decided to play finders keepers and erected fences around the castle. The townspeople, furious, took their fight to Parliament with little success. Simpson was taken to court, but he abused his position and avoided prosecution. He was so well protected that he was able to ignore the pleas from the town to give the land back for over 10 years. In April 1865, the argument came to a head. Simpson took out an injunction on a school near to his home, citing that the children's laughter was disturbing him. For the townsfolk, this was one step too far, and they held a public meeting, all voting that Simpson must be stopped. 11 local men left the meeting and destroyed Simpson's walls and gates surrounding the castle and took the land back for the town. The police dubbed the disturbance as a riot, read them the rights, and all 11 men were sentenced to 3 months in prison. As the news of the riot spread, people rallied around the men and their families, donating money and joining the fight against Simon and his accusers. The money raised covered all the men's legal costs, as well as supporting their families back home. The men returned as heroes. People celebrated in the streets, and a huge gala and ceremonial dinner was held. Each man received a tankard for their efforts. No one really knows what became of Simpson, but to this day, no one has tried to lay claim to the castle and grounds again. I don't think anyone would dare to. For many years, the railway brought both tourist and essential goods into the town, and everything seemed to go into the town's favour. The station had 4 waiting rooms, a station master's office, and a booking hall. On the York-bound side, the passengers were segregated into classes, but the Leeds-bound did not carry any segregation, and a waiting room was provided for all. Finally, the goods yard provisioned the town with freight, maybe even the odd cattle truck, as the sale barn was not too far away. In the 1960s, everything changed. The goods yard was made redundant, and the town was facing the brunt of the Beeching Acts. Beeching petitioned that Knaresborough station be closed. The line ran alongside the A59, a major connecting road between York and Leeds, and as Beeching favoured road travel to the railway, to him it seemed that the railway was surplus to requirements, and the only place of significance to him that the railway served was Knaresborough itself. The closure of the line would have spelt doom for many of the hamlets that ran along the line, and the people fought tirelessly against it. The fight went through Parliament straight to the ears of Barbara Castle, who was then Minister of Transport. Barbara took the cries for help to heart, and she refused the closure. While Knaresborough Station and the Harrogate line was saved, the line to Borough Bridge was not, and it was forced to close. The line was also reduced to a single stretch of track from Knaresborough to Cattle. Up until last year, it was one of the last commercial lines that still used the token system to guide the trains through the section. The goods yard was taken apart and is now used for allotments and business dwellings. Knaresborough may have been scarred by Beeching's decision, but it was one of the very few stations that fought back and won. The station has not been manned since the late 60s and fell into disrepair. The Friends of Knaresborough Station restored the old station, but the Leeds-bound waiting rooms were demolished and the long canopy was cut back. Thanks to their efforts, it has since been recognised for its sheer beauty and is now a Grade 2 listed building. The station makes use of the empty buildings and waiting rooms by letting them to independent businesses who add their own unique charm. The view of the viaduct from the castle is one of the most famous views the UK has to offer, and has been shown countless times on promotional material attributed to the railway. In fact, there are very few Knaresborians that have not taken in the splendour of the view, and it's at this viewpoint under the stars and amid the fireworks that I chose to watch the world turn into a new century. The town is full of independent businesses and unique shops, and has a few unique quirks. Mother Shipton left her mark at the base of her cave, and her petrifying and wishing well has seen millions of visitors. People come to hear her stories, her prophecies, and see items which have been dangling from the petrifying well slowly being turned to stone. Today, the well and the cave is the oldest tourist attraction in the world. The castle and Tudor courtyard has been turned into a museum, with a larger museum in the works. The old castle grounds is now a recreational area with a bowling green and mini-golf, and you can still visit the keep, the dungeons and the courthouse. In the courthouse you will see a nod to Knaresborough's famous sun. John Metcalfe, or as many know him as Blind Jack, was blinded at the age of 5 due to smallpox, but he didn't let his disability hinder him. He became a brilliant engineer and road builder. The market is still going strong every Wednesday, and you can find Blind Jack and Mother Shipton bronzed and sat at their benches ready to welcome visitors. Once a year, on the second of weekend in June, the town shuts down and is taken over by 90 teams of 6 pushing a converted bed. The town holds this huge carnival-style parade before the 90 teams race around the town to the cheers of thousands before plunging into the river. The bed race raised thousands of pounds each year for charity, and everybody in the town looks forward to the huge party and the crazy atmosphere. Knaresborough, as I said, holds a very special place in my heart. The town to me means family, and it will always be my home, even if I move away from it. I know I say it a lot, but I would recommend Knaresborough to anybody, especially during the bed race. But if you just want to take in the view, then Knaresborough Castle is the place to be. It's spectacular, and it's a perfect place to watch the trains go by on a lazy Sunday afternoon.